Our friend Talent Dance TV asks another question. He says, Ramsey, when it's time for you to move on from this world, and you are no longer here with us, how would you like your legacy to be? What would you like to be remembered for? Or what would you have liked people to think about you? Or what would you have liked to accomplish before your time comes to pass? Or does it even matter to you at all? Let us know. Okay. Man, asking the deep questions, my friend. Deep questions. When my time on Earth is done, man, I'm going to tell you, when I was 21 years old, I'd recently just come back to the U.S. from Argentina, spent a couple of years in Buenos Aires living as an LDS missionary, a Mormon missionary. And for those 2 years, from ages 19 to 21, I went door to door and poured my heart out to people about my religious faith, about how I believed in life after death and the immortality of the human soul, and these things that I still absolutely believe to this day. And when I was 21 years old, something happened. I came back to the U.S. and I got really, really sick. And I ended up hospitalized for months, had multiple surgeries, and it was a horrible experience, and I came very close to death. And I remember feeling scared. They were taking me into the operating room, I think the third surgery maybe. And I remember thinking, I don't want this to happen again, not again, not again. And I remember being afraid of death. It was a very, very real possibility. And that shocked me that I was afraid of death. Because for the last 2 years, I've been teaching this message that I really sincerely believe that there's life after death, that there's more than just this. And I thought, if I really believe that, then I shouldn't be afraid of death, should I? And that thought scared me because it kind of shook my faith a little bit. And I'm going to tell you something, it's okay to be scared. So there's some scary stuff out there. Death and the great beyond, it's generally at the top of the list for most people. So regardless of what you believe, you know, it's okay to be scared. But I reevaluated a lot about my life during this time. I remember thinking, man, I haven't done what I feel like I really wanted to do, what I'm supposed to do. Haven't got stuff done. And had a bit of an existential crisis. I decided if I live through this, I won't live life the same way. And I didn't. But you're not asking about how we should live our lives right now. But what about afterward? You know, when I'm not here anymore. The spirit lives on, but the body dies. What about the rest of us left behind? What about our legacy? It's a tough one. Yes, do I even care about that? I guess so. I think we all do to a certain extent. We want to be remembered in a positive way. We don't want people going around saying, that guy was a jerk, I hated him. So I suppose I wouldn't like people to remember me that way. You know, having children, it changes my perspective a little bit. Because as far as opinions, people's opinions, there are very few people on this planet whose opinions truly matter to me. That wasn't always the case. Wasn't always the case. When I was a younger man, I remember there was an internet forum I frequented. There was a fighters forum that MMA fighters would get on, and they'd sometimes talk smack to each other. Like, oh man, I could beat you up in a fight. No, I could beat you up in a fight. And there was a lot of posturing going on this internet forum. A lot of posturing, trying to be perceived as, the alpha dog of the group. And I remember at the time, it felt very important for me to attain some level of respect from my peers. And I felt like if and when I'm a good enough fighter, I'll earn their respect, and then it will matter. And people would talk a lot of banter and smack on this internet forum, and a lot of it came my way as well. Like, oh, Ramsey, you suck, you're not very good. This sort of negativity would sometimes come my way, and it affected me because I cared about it. It's like, oh man, my peers don't respect me. I feel bad about that. I don't want that. And the other day, I was chatting on the internet with some folks, and some very similar negativity came my way. Some people were like, oh, you suck at fighting, you suck, you're no good. And it didn't faze me at all because I didn't care. The opinions of these people did not matter to me for several reasons. One, I don't hold them as truth. Two, they're not the people whose opinions matter to me. The two little girls in this world, my daughters, Eve, Ivy, 5 years old, 2 years old. And when I walk in the room, I don't have to do anything except walk in the room, coming home from work, and they jump for joy, throw their arms around me, smile from ear to ear. And it's a fantastic feeling. It's amazing. So all I did to earn that was show up. When I was a child, my parents split up. They got divorced. I was about 2 years old, and I grew up with my mother. And I remember these early childhood memories of waiting by the window, waiting and hoping that my father would come to visit. Because when you're a small child, you just have this innate love for your parents, for your mother and father. Whether they deserve it or not, you just give it to them, because children are filled with this love. This love that I get from my children, which is awesome. And I remember feeling that from my dad, and waiting by the window, looking out, saying to my mom, when is Daddy coming? When is Daddy coming? When is Daddy coming home? And I remember one day she looked at me and said, he's never coming home, in anger and frustration. And that just destroyed me. Just absolutely destroyed me. And didn't see him too much growing up. And I remember as a teenager growing very bitter and angsty about this. Like, oh man, I hate this guy. He was absent from my life. I've grown past that. I don't feel that way anymore. But at the same time, when I became a father myself, I decided I want to be there. I want to show up. I want to come home for them. Because that is what matters to me. And if my legacy is nothing more than that, showing up, being there for the people that matter to me, now that's enough. There was a time when I was a younger man, I chased after accolades. chased after titles and belts, and trophies and medals, wins in the ring and in the cage. And I remember having a conversation with one of my former opponents, a guy named Jeff Moody. The guy who knocked me out in a Muay Thai fight once. And he said that when he got in the cage, when he got in a ring, when he got into a fight, a sport fight, and the fights where he won, he felt like a god on top of the world. It was this extremely amazing feeling for a very short time. But then afterwards, the feeling would dissipate and it would just be like an emptiness, a hollowness. Like, oh, that didn't fill the void. And in spite of the fact that this guy was an amazing fighter and he has this great highlight reel of knockouts, it didn't fill the void. I get that. I remember I was on a bit of a losing streak when I started fighting professional as a kickboxer, and I remember feeling like when I get that first win, it's gonna be this big game-changing, life-changing experience. People are gonna respect me. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna feel important. It's going to be important. And then it happened. It was kind of a weird moment. It was like, all those expectations weren't met. You know, it was kind of nice. It was kind of fun, but just like my friend Jeff said, it was hollow, ultimately. So having your name up in lights, having people chant your name, being famous or infamous, doesn't fill that void. And I remember this quote from Muhammad Ali. It's a very famous quote. He said, "I hated every minute of training, but I told myself, suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion." And that's what motivated him to go on and become a champion and become a great boxer. And it worked for him. I don't know how he felt about that afterward. I don't know if he felt hollow. But when I hear that quote, it makes me a little bit sad. Suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion. So to me, life is not about the end product. It's not about the end of the road. It's about the journey. It's about the path. Same thing with my martial art. It's not about achieving the certain level of mastery or earning a certain belt or degree or winning a certain number of fights. It's about the path. Being on that path and exploring it and looking at all the details along the way and enjoying the process. Out of all human technology, as complex as it has become in this day and age, the most difficult thing for humans to do, technologically speaking, oh man, they're drilling here. China and they're drilling. I'm going to move to the back. The most difficult thing, technologically speaking, is to record and preserve information. You might think, what? People have been recording and preserving information since recorded history. Since recorded history. Think about that for a minute. How much of human history do we actually have? How much is recorded? A couple thousand years from a handful of civilizations. All right. let me reiterate that. We know we have a couple thousand years of information from a handful, like half a dozen civilizations, right? We know a few thousand years of history vaguely from Egypt, from China, from the ancient Mediterranean area, Israel, as recorded in the Bible. But outside of that, what we have in detail is pretty short-lived, right? Digital information. How long is that preserved for? Decades, depending on the format. Decades, right? What's on the internet right now, that's not going to last the millennia. That's not going to be around in 1,000 years. You know, even what was chiseled on stone thousands of years ago, I mean, that wears off eventually. Water, man, water. Simple, basic water. Give it enough time, and consistently running over the stone, it will wear it away. Wind and sand and rain, man. That by itself will destroy our very footprint on this planet, given enough time. I often wonder about the arrogant presumption we often make as humans that right now we are the pinnacle of civilization. I mean, according to science, humans have been on this planet for, well, there's a fairly broad spectrum, but at least 10,000, maybe 23,000, maybe even 50,000 years. Modern humans, depending on who you ask and which source you consult, but at least 10,000 years. Probably a lot longer. Some people even speculate millions of years. The modern human genome. Anyway, it's been around longer than recorded history. So if we've had modern humans, and I'm not talking about proto-humans, not talking about the missing link, but actual humans with the same DNA that we carry today, that were on this planet 53,000 years ago, or even 1,000,000 years ago, or whatever that number is, which is way longer than the few thousand years of recorded history we have. How arrogant is it to assume that this has never happened before? I mean, it's only been in the last, less than 100 years that we've gone from the horse and buggy age to the space age. An age where there was no electricity, to the information age with computers and the internet. Man, how do we know this hasn't happened before? Now, not throwing out some crazy conspiracy theories for nothing. It's just that we don't know. We don't know because the most difficult thing to do technologically for human beings is to record and preserve information for the long run. So the legacies of those people who lived 53,000 years ago, if that was the case, we don't know what it was. And we can find tidbits of a few scattered civilizations. I mean, man, for all we know, we could be living in a post-apocalyptic world. So why do I bring that up when you ask about my legacy? What legacy do I want to bring behind? Or leave behind, sorry. Number one, my children. I want them to know that their father loved them. I want them to know that he was there, because I'm going to do that. But more importantly, I want them to know what I believe. that I believe in the immortality of the human soul, and that I believe in the potential of mankind to be like God. Yeah, I said that. That we have God-like potential. That we're put on this earth for a very specific reason, and that is to give us experiences, to help us move along that path, the same path that God moves on. So that's a path that I believe does not leave you feeling hollow while pursuing it. That's a path that will not leave you empty. Man, look around you, all this stuff, the world around us, money, things, buildings, objects, our bodies themselves, they're toys, man. They're toys. Simple children's playthings. And toys are tools. Toys are important for children. Play is very important for children. It's how they learn. It's how they learn to adapt to this world. It's how they learn to cope with life. Fun isn't just frivolous, it's important. So all this stuff around us, toys, and we're the children. How many people have you met in your life? Somebody asked me once, how many people have you met in your life? I'll tell you. One. Only one. Yes, I've run into thousands and thousands of individuals. I've had thousands and thousands of conversations, thousands and thousands of personal interactions with other human beings. But how many people do we meet in this world? One. Gonna wax a little metaphysical here. You and me, we're not so different. That old adage, which is repeated across the religions and philosophies of the world, from Christianity to Confucianism, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It was spoken by Jesus, it was spoken by Confucius, it was spoken by many wise men and sages throughout the years. Why? Just to teach us to do nice things, because it's a nice thing to do? And why does that matter? Because this life, is a time to prepare to meet God. And since the objective is to become like Him, and understand that God is no respecter of persons, because essentially we are all the same. No matter what you look like, or where you're born, or what language you grew up speaking, what color your skin is, whether you're male or female. I'm you, you're me. Just different iterations. Having different experiences, but essentially we're the same thing. Children of God on that path. On that path that God walked before. So if I could leave you with that, have you ponder that. And seek out whether or not that's even true. Now, that's a legacy enough for me. What I don't care about. Man, you got me thinking about my funeral. I got to tell you about my mom. My mother is British and has a very different sense of humor than most Americans that I know. Because it's very dark and very dry, and she didn't smile or laugh very much. When she did smile, it was with her eyes. And at the kitchen table, when we would eat together, as a family, we would always talk about funerals and death and dying. It was my mother's favorite subject to talk about. When I die, she would say, I don't want you to spend a lot of money on a funeral, just build a coffin out of the boards of the fence around the yard and bury me in the backyard, she would say. I've been to a few funerals where people were eulogized by those they loved, and often they spawned a discussion afterwards. What would you like your funeral to be like? What would you like people to say about you at your wake or your service or whatever you call it? Man, here's the thing. Funerals are for the living. They're not for the dead. I wrote a song once when I was in my 20s, after I got out of the hospital. The lyrics went something like this. So, when I'm gone, don't put flowers on my grave. It's just the same if you wait until tomorrow. So those flowers, they're not for the dead guy. They're to make the living feel better. It's wishful thinking on the part of the living person putting flowers on that grave. I wish I could have done more. I wish I could tell him I loved him one more time. I wish I could tell her something that I wasn't able to. I wish I could have one more day with them. When my paternal grandmother died, I was very close to her throughout my childhood. She died at a ripe old age, 98 years old. And I remember her children, my aunts and uncles were there, and they were sad. Their mother had just died. But I remember this moved me much more deeply than I thought it would. So I saw my grandmother's body, and everybody, my aunts and uncles were saying, well, she was old, it was her time, she had a good life. And all those things were true. But I felt like, no, it wasn't enough. She was too young. I've met old 20-year-olds, and I met young dudes in their 50s. I met a young 80-year-old, several young 80-year-olds. Some old kids. A lot of this concept of age is when we decide to just curl up and die. Decide to give up on living. And a lot of young people do that early on. My grandmother wasn't one of them. So the legacy she left for me was, get stuff done. Live your life. Do things. Do what's important. Spend time with the people who are important to you. Be the type of person that people are going to miss when you're gone. Be that type of person where people are going to say, they were too young, it was too soon, even if you're 100 years old. That's the legacy she left for me. If I can live up to that, I suppose that'll be a good thing. Dude, that's a deep question. Deep, 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 deep. Well, I could wax on for a while, but this is already over a half hour, so hey, thank you for the question. If you have any other questions about anything, life, death, fight training, fitness, personal advice, let me know. I'll answer. Leave them in the comments below or send me an email at ramseydewey@gmail.com. Or really, just leave a comment down below. I'll answer your question. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far through my long, rambling rant, now get out there and make something of your lives.